All right. I'm Peter Alessandria, and for the next 90 minutes, I invite you to be bigger than you think you are. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. Let's take a look at our agenda for this evening. So as usual, we're going to start with some announcements, then we'll do our recommended reading, followed by the affirmation, which is actually a quote of the day. Then we'll do introductions and victories. That's an opportunity for anybody who's new to introduce themselves or for people to share a victory or a celebration from the past week. Then we're going to break into our review. We're reviewing chapters 4 and 5 from my book, Be Bigger Than You Think You Are. So we're going to do the first part, take a break, and then come back, work on the second part, and then do some Q&A and wrap it up by 9 o'clock. A reminder that tonight's workshop is being recorded and will be available on the BeBiggerToday.com website and YouTube channel within the next 48 hours. Please feel free to stop your video and mute your microphone if you do not wish to be seen or heard on the recording. Be Bigger Than You Think You Are, second edition, author-signed paperbacks are now available on my website and on Amazon. If you'd like to go to my website, it's BeBiggerToday.com/book. It's on sale for $21.95, and I will personally sign that copy for you if you place the order through my website. So check it out. And while you're there, also take a look at my New York City photo book, New York Cityscapes. This is a collaboration between myself and 6 other New York City area photographers. We each have our own unique take on the Big Apple and the landmarks and skylines that make New York City so great. So check it out, again, at my website, BeBiggerToday.com/bookstore. That is also on sale for $16.95. Get your copy today. And while you're there, check out some merch, hats and t-shirts. Save 20% by using the code MERCH20 at checkout at BeBiggerToday.com/merch. And you can also see some of my original art and photography, my original landscape and cityscape images, as well as some abstract designs that I've created. These are available as gallery-wrapped canvas, professionally framed gallery-wrapped canvas prints, and they're available on my website at BeBiggerToday.com/art-photography. And here is your commercial. Peter's photos and abstract designs are uniquely beautiful, one-of-a-kind works of art. These gallery-wrapped canvas prints are set in a contemporary shadow box floating frame and will enhance the beauty of any home or office. Available in 4 different sizes, each piece is professionally framed and comes complete and ready to hang. Frames are available in your choice of black, white, or brown, and each is signed by the artist. Peter's original art and photography will make a great gift for a client, for yourself, or someone you love. Order yours today. And moving right along, we also have NYC refrigerator magnets. That's right, I am the NYC refrigerator magnet magnate. This is my unique collection of one-of-a-kind New York City photos on refrigerator magnets. Check them out at BeBiggerToday.com/merch. And my newest interview is available. So this was an interview that I did with Biz TV. It was actually a live interview that we did on the Biz TV channel. Mary Burt Goodwin and myself had a nice conversation about 15-20 minutes on what it means to be bigger than you think you are. So you could check this out. Go to the homepage of BeBiggerToday.com, my website. Look for this image on the homepage, click on it, and it will take you directly to that interview. So you can watch for yourself. It's a lot of fun, and I hope to be back on with them again soon. And I am available for one-on-one coaching and or corporate consulting. So if you're a creative person, perhaps a writer, an artist, a photographer, or if you have a business or work for a business and would like me to come in and speak to your sales team or your management team on how they can be bigger than they think they are, reach out to me through the website and we'll set that up. And finally, in lieu of donations, the workshop is winding down, but I ask that people purchase a book, the second edition, either on Amazon or on my website to help support the workshops and to continue the work, whatever the next iteration will be in the fall. All right, so let's start off tonight with our recommended reading. So these are, it's actually more than 2 books. I have it set up as 2 books, but I'll tell you about it in a minute. So the first one is The Impersonal Life, and the other one is The Way to the Kingdom. Now, these books were written by Joseph Benner. Joseph Benner, we're going to talk about him in a second. These books were released in the early 1900s. I think it was around 1922 and 1926. If you're on a spiritual path, if you are interested in things beyond the obvious, if you're at all inclined towards metaphysics, these are great books. And I actually only discovered them recently, perhaps in the last year or so. And they have become a main part of my spiritual practice, a main part of my pretty much everyday studies at this point. So The Impersonal Life was actually written anonymously at first, and eventually his name was attached to it. He was part of an organization, kind of a new age. This was around, as I said, the turn of the century when the New Thought movement was happening, not New Age, New Thought. The Unity Church was established, religious science, and all of that. But these books are a little different. So The Impersonal Life and The Way to the Kingdom are the 2 that I recommend, although actually a way to ease into his work is, if you look on the one on your right, The Way Out, The Way Beyond, Wealth, and the Teacher, those are actually shorter. They're not really books, they're like pamphlets. And I came across this on Amazon today, actually, that these are all available in one publication. So you can get all 5 of these in one publication from Amazon, probably elsewhere. And if you don't want to purchase the book, you can find PDFs on the website I have listed here. It's theimpersonallife.weebly.com. It's a free website. I'm not sure who set this up, but it is a complete kind of history of Joseph Benner and a repository for all his work. So you could find PDFs there. There's also a couple of audio recordings out there. I forgot to put it on this slide, but I've recommended in the past, I've recommended Brian Scott, his YouTube channel. That's actually how I found out about these, about Joseph Benner and about these books. So Brian Scott has a YouTube channel, and what he does is he narrates audiobooks and so on, and then puts them up on YouTube. And so that's how I originally found out about these. So you can actually listen to these books on YouTube, on Brian Scott's channel. And The Impersonal Life, here's the publisher's blurb. The Impersonal Life is one of the key books written on the topic of self-discovery and leading a spiritual life. Author Joseph Benner penned this work as anonymous in the early 20th century, and it has become a popular title among millions of readers since. The Impersonal Life is highly recommended for those who are interested in learning how to lead a spiritual life and are in the process of self-discovery, as well as discovering a connection to your higher self, the part of each person that is directly connected with the God source. So I have to be honest, it's intense. The material, the way it's presented, gives one a lot to think about in terms of our larger role in the universe, the idea of a higher self, a part of us that's directly connected with the source, and where we actually get our power to live our lives. And it's a little challenging, but I really, if you resonate with anything that I'm saying, if it sparks your interest, I would definitely recommend checking it out. So The Impersonal Life, The Way to the Kingdom, The Way Out, The Way Beyond, Wealth, The Teacher. It's all great stuff. And I really highly recommend it. I mean, this has kind of been leading me for almost the last probably close to a year now. And I can see that this will be something I come back to time and time again. So check it out. And now our quote of the day. So we're back to Abraham Hicks publications, Esther Hicks and Abraham, very well known for their work with the law of attraction. So the quote of the day is, you can't help sick people by being sick. You can't help poor people by being poor. It is only in your thriving that you have anything to offer anyone. If you're wanting to help others, be as tapped in, tuned in, and turned on as possible. So this says to me, if we really want to be of service to other people, if we really want to be helpful in the world, it's really, really important that we're in a good place within ourselves, that we've taken care of ourselves, that we're just in a really balanced, even, secure place, that we have done everything that we can do to take care of ourselves. And so when we go out into the world, we're not looking to get from other people. We're not looking for ego gratification. We're not put off by the proclivities and vicissitudes of life. I'm going to talk all about that tonight in our review. So be as grounded, as centered, and as big, be bigger than you think you are. Be as big as you can be. And that's the best way to help other people. It will inspire them, and it will really allow you to make an impact. Whereas, I'll speak for myself, I notice that when I'm not in such a great place, things don't often go as, at least the way I want them to go or the way I planned. So again, I like this. You can't help sick people by being sick. You can't help poor people by being poor. It's only in your thriving that you have anything to offer anyone. If you're wanting to help others, to be of service, be as tuned in, tapped in, tuned in, and turned on as possible. And of course, this speaks to our emotional state. So if I'm feeling resentful, if I'm feeling depressed, if I'm feeling hopeless, it's really hard for me to positively impact other people. It's really hard for me to make a difference in the world. So this is a call for us to take care of ourselves, to get to that place where we want to be, so we can have the maximum impact on the world. All right, so this is an opportunity. This is our introductions and victories. It's an opportunity for anybody who's new to introduce themselves if they would like to, or for people to share any victories or celebrations from the past week. So who wants to kick us off here and say hello or share a victory or celebration?
All right.
You're on.
I'm actually very tired tonight, so I was going to listen. No victories, no celebration, but I did take myself to T-Mobile and I got a new phone. I got a 12 and I did it all by myself. So I'm trying with the technology. I was like a little kid. I was like, oh my God, is this going to change anything that I knew? Bottom line is, something happened with my phone, brought me to T-Mobile, and I wound up getting a new phone. But it's really the same as the old one. But just wanted to let you know that I am updating. What did you say before? I'm trying to stay positive. No, you said something. What did you say before? You can't help people if you're, depressed and this and that. So I'm just trying to stay in the game. So that's my victory.
All right. Well, I only have one thing to say, Barb.
Ooh. All right, here it is. It almost looks like the same old.
For the new phone. All right.
A new phone.
Well, that's good, because what is that? That's moving past our fear of technology. Yes. It's moving past the voice that says we can't do this. It's going to be hard. All the negative narration that we have around things like getting a new phone. So it's great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good job. Looks like Cynthia's ready. Cynthia, you want to go?
Sure. Oh, congratulations on the new phone. That's a big deal. Woohoo. And thank you too for the suggestions about the readings. Very interesting. Very interesting. My celebration is that I got connected. I've been living here since December, so it's taken a while, but I got connected with a gerontologist who is an endocrinologist. So I went to see her yesterday, and I'm going tomorrow to see a dermatologist. And these are medical issues that are part of my ongoing self-care. And so I was so pleased to talk with this woman that is so knowledgeable, that one of the things that previous doctors had poo-pooed and said, oh, that's just crazy, that's not real. She said, oh, that symptom, that what you're expressing has to do with this, this, and this. And I thought, wow, I was right all the time. And here's someone intelligent, competent, and capable validating it. So I was thrilled. And hopefully the experience with the dermatologist tomorrow will be just as wonderful. Thank you.
Awesome. Great.
So,
thanks, Cynthia. That's taking care of ourselves. That's taking our needs, putting our needs first, making sure that we're in good condition so we can actually be of service in the world.
Yes.
Self-care equals self-love. And I talk a lot about the power and the importance of self-love. So good for you, Cynthia. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who else? Did I see Dee Dee? Dee Dee, were you ready to go? Did you want to go?
Sure. Hi, Peter. Hi, everybody. Okay, my biggest victory is that Cynthia sent me the link right when you were doing the introductions. I don't know how I missed the link, Peter, but I've got to have a hot button to either I got to test it in advance before the workshop, or I got to have a red line to you guys, you and Barbara, because I sent emails, but thank God Cynthia picked up her phone. So here I am. I've had a relationship challenge throughout this last 6 months, and the victory is that person walked in the room. We gave each other a big hug. We're being comrades, and I didn't have to be the bad guy, to help her understand. She needed to put the client first and, get along with everybody. It didn't have to be me. I didn't have to be the one. And so I just feel fortunate because in the past, Peter, I would have taken my armor with me all the way to the grave, and never have made room for the other person. And we didn't do that in this case, and our client really needs us. So it's a win-win-win-win-win, a huge win. Yeah, thanks. And I'm excited for tonight and next week. Thanks, Pat.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Good job. Thank you, Dee Dee. So yeah, I'm glad you've had some resolution with that, and it sounds like things are shifting. So that's great. There's a T-shirt that I saw once that I don't know if it was a Course in Miracles thing or if it was like a kind of a new age thing. It was a T-shirt that said "Shift happens," and it's a play on "shit happens." So good for you. Things are shifting, and I can almost guarantee that when the outside things, when relationships and all that are changing, it's a reflection of what's going on within us. Everything that we see out there is a reflection of what's going on in here. So that's great. Thank you, Dee Dee. Anybody else want to say hi or share a victory? All right. So we are going to jump in. Got a lot to do tonight, again. So we are reviewing chapters 4 and 5. This is, again, we're working now from the second edition. So there's some new material in here. I'm not going to have a chance to highlight all of it. We're just going to touch on a few points, but chapters 4 and 5 is kind of the middle of the book, obviously, but it sets us up for 6 and 7 that we're going to do next week, and then we'll be done with the review, and I'm pretty sure done with the workshop for the time being. All right, so why don't we jump right in here? So chapter 4, from FEAR to LOVE. So we start with my definition of fear. So fear is an emotional response to a perception of ourselves as powerless and or unlovable in a given situation. All right, so the key thing, and one of the key things in this definition is to a perception of ourselves. So again, I've been saying since day one, this question of how do you see yourself? How do I see myself? Who do I think I am? That determines everything. That determines my experience of every relationship, of every situation, of every interaction I have with other people, with my environment. It all begins with how I see myself, who I think I am. So if I have a perception of myself as powerless and or unlovable, then chances are pretty good I'm going to have a negative emotional response to that. Remember, our thoughts lead to our feelings. And part of our thoughts as a mental process are our beliefs and our perceptions. So if my beliefs, my perceptions, my thinking is negative, I'm going to experience a negative emotion. Now, in this case, we said we have an emotional response. So I'm saying emotion, number two, emotion is energy in motion. I'm sure you've heard that before, but why is that important? Well, the thing I want to call to your attention is our emotional state affects our ability to do things in the world. Again, if I'm depressed or if I'm sad or if I'm angry or if I have self-pity, chances are pretty good I'm not really going to be able to do much out there that's significant in the world. In terms of being of service to others, could just be my own family, friends, neighbors, whatever. So when I have a low emotional state, my energy is down. And when my energy is down, I'm not going to feel like doing anything. I'm not going to feel like doing the things I need to do for myself, much less the things I'd like to do for other people. So our emotional state influences our energy, our physical energy in our body. Now I'm going to talk more about perceiving ourselves as powerless and or unlovable in a minute, but I want to come back to what we also talked about in chapter 4, and that's the difference between fear and caution. So I'm not saying in any of this work that we have to throw caution to the wind. We don't want to ignore, our sense of safety, our sense of common sense or anything like that. Caution means we wear a seatbelt when we drive. We look both ways before we cross the street. We read all the material before we invest in that investment. That's caution. And it's a common sense approach to life. It's a rational and proportional response to the vicissitudes of life, because there are challenges out there, there are dangers out there, there are pitfalls, and coming from a place of caution, we can address those things in a rational, healthy, functional manner. Fear, on the other hand, for many of us, is neither rational nor proportional. So I had an experience just this afternoon where my fear, the way I saw myself in a particular situation was exactly what we're talking about here. I saw myself as powerless. I saw somebody else as having power over me and doing something that was going to negatively impact me. And I felt there was nothing I could do about that. And I immediately felt that surge of fear, anxiety, stress. And it was all based on how I saw myself in that moment. But the thing was, I could not respond to that situation rationally or proportionally. I'm looking back now on how I reacted, and it was way out of proportion to what was actually happening. So it wasn't a proportional response. It wasn't an effective response. And the good news is I didn't stay there as long as I might have in the past, and I was able to pull myself out of it and have a different, form and focus on a different idea about myself to refocus my attention. Last week, I think it was, we said that stress comes from when we focus on things we have no power over. And I recognized that I was focusing on something that I had no power over, and I was feeling anxious and stressful as a result. So the difference between fear and caution: we take care of ourselves, we do whatever is reasonable and necessary to protect ourselves and all of that. But we want to be aware, because when the problem, like I had today, when I get into that place of fear, I don't make good choices and decisions. I could see, looking back on what I did in that moment, I was not making good choices and decisions for myself. And it was all coming out of fear, anxiousness, powerlessness, lack of safety. And again, the good news is I caught myself and I was able to reverse most of that. But it really had an impact on me. And I can see how in the past, I could have spent a whole day or longer in that state. And as I always say, the negative emotions are not the problem. The problem is when we make choices and decisions based on those emotions. So I did a few things. I'm looking back now that I realize I probably could have done differently. I'm not going to beat myself up for that. I'm not going to make myself wrong, but I am going to recognize that when that fear comes up, I really, really have to get centered. I have to get focused. I have to shift how I see myself in that moment, focus on what I can change, what I do have control over, and notice then that I can make better choices and decisions for myself. All right, so powerlessness. For me, that means who we think we are is helpless. It means the idea that I have about myself is that I'm not going to be okay. I'm not going to be able to take care of myself. I'm not going to be able to get what I want or need or what I think I want or need in that situation. And those thoughts and ideas about myself, they render me powerless. They actually inhibit my ability to take effective action in that situation. So when I say, fear is an emotional response to a perception of myself as powerless, I'm thinking I'm not going to be okay and I can't take care of myself. See, it's not the situation that's the problem. It's always and only how I see myself in that situation. So the challenges that face me don't determine how I feel. It's how I see myself in relation to those challenges that determines my reactions, my emotional reactions, and how I feel, what I think, say, feel, and do in response to that. Now, unlovable, it's pretty obvious. Unlovable literally means that we're not able to be loved. And unlovable, this idea that I'm unlovable, we're going to talk more about that tonight. That's been a big theme in my life. I can see that for much of my life, I perceive myself as unlovable. I've had this idea in my head that said there was something about me that was not okay, that was not acceptable, that I was upsetting to other people. And I'm not going to get too much into it in our discussion tonight, but I talk a lot about this in chapter 4 in the book, that our childhood experiences can form our identity, can form our self-image, and can impact who we think we are and how we see ourselves as adults. So we want to be really conscious of that, really aware of that. And so this idea that I was unlovable came out of my experiences as a young kid, and it became so ingrained in me that that's just who I thought I was. And I never thought to question it. And instead, I built a life around that idea to compensate for the fact that I was unlovable. This idea that I'm unlovable came out of my childhood experiences, and it was based on the perceptions of a 6-year-old. And again, I talk a lot about this in the book. I'm not going to get into it tonight, but what happens is those experiences are filtered through the mind of a child who cannot make sense of it and who does not know how to navigate challenging situations, especially with other people, especially with the adults in our lives. So, but my point is, I came to this conclusion about myself and I never questioned it. I thought that was just who I was. I thought that was something I had to compensate for in my relationships. And honestly, at a certain point, it was so painful that I repressed it. So it wasn't even a conscious part of my processing. It wasn't even in my conscious awareness. It was just kind of my subconscious reactive mode to situations where I felt challenged in that way. Now, another thing that comes from my definition is that fear is situational. So remember, a minute ago, I said it's mostly situational. Yes, we can walk around with a general sense of anxiety or dread, but the intense fear, like the experience I had today, I was fine. And within like 10 minutes, I was off the Richter scale in terms of my emotional reactions. And it was based on that particular situation. So it turns out that's good news, because remember, a minute ago, I said, the problem is never the situation. The problem is always and only how I see myself in that situation. And it's good news because I generally can't change the situation, but I can almost always change how I see myself. And that's what I was able to do today to shift my experience. So fear is generally situational. And from my own experience, we can't always tell whether the source of fear is real or imagined. Now, I'm going to talk about that again towards the end of this chapter review. But this idea that I'm reacting to the situations in my life, not based on the situation itself, but based on the meaning that I give that situation. And the meaning that I give that situation is based on how I see myself. It's based on who I think I am. So I'm never actually responding or reacting to what's going on out there. I'm reacting to my subjective interpretation of what's going on out there based on who I think I am, based on how I see myself, generally based on my past experiences in similar or the same situation. So I have found, like, even looking back on my experience this afternoon, it was not nearly as bad as I thought it was. It was more imagined than real. Now, it's still something I'm going to address and still something that I can address, but it was not as fraught with danger or whatever as I thought it was in that moment. So the point is, we can't always rely on our perceptions, because sometimes we overemphasize or over-exaggerate the situation based on our subjective interpretation of the situation. Now, in chapter 4, I start talking about love relationships, romantic relationships, family relationships in the context of love. And one of the things I talk about is infatuation and chemistry, and that feeling when we meet somebody new and we're head over heels with that person. I'm going to suggest that, and not everybody is happy with this when I suggest this, and honestly, I'm not that happy about it myself when I kind of look at it, but it's my position, it's my thought that that feeling of chemistry, that feeling of infatuation is not really love. It may lead to love, true love, what I call true love, which we'll talk about in a minute, but probably not for many of us. And there's nothing wrong with the feeling of infatuation, chemistry, whatever you want to call it, that excitement. It's actually pretty cool. But I'm going to suggest, and we talked a lot about this in chapter 6, we talked about the ego. And it seems to me that that feeling of infatuation, that good feeling that comes along with that, comes from the idea that when we think someone special likes us, that must mean that we're special too. Now, if you ever read A Course in Miracles, Course in Miracles talks all about the ego and specialness. The ego thrives on this idea that it's special, that it's better than other people, that it's more, that it's superior. We judge other people when we're in our egoic mind, and we take it upon ourselves to make other people wrong. Remember the title of chapter 6? Would you rather be right or happy? It's this idea that when we meet somebody new, if we're not in a centered space, if we're not in a grounded place, and I'm not going to say more about this because this is a whole workshop in and of itself. It's in chapter 4 if you're really interested. But I think, for me at least, I can see it's based on this notion that somebody special liking me means that I must be special too. Number 8, the ego's primary motivation for being in relationship with other people is to get something from them. So I get ego gratification by, again, somebody who I think is special, who thinks I'm special. That's gratifying to my ego. When the getting stops, negative emotions quickly follow. So again, I go into a lot of description, especially in the second edition. I elaborate on this a lot more. This idea of how the egoic mind reacts to other people in our relationships. And when that specialness is taken away from us, how we react to that. And it's not, it's often not very pretty, and it's not very nice. And I'm actually going to stop there. If you're really interested in more, go get the second edition, chapter 4. Now, the difference between the ego's definition of love, which is getting something from other people, and what I'm calling true love is only concerned with what it can give, not with what it can get. So for me, one aspect of love, whether it's loving myself or loving another person, is how much I give to that person, how much I give to that relationship. Now, immediately there's yellow flags and potential red flags there for somebody like me if you're codependent. So as a codependent, it's a very fine line that I walk between giving to somebody else and getting enmeshed in their lives and becoming resentful when they don't reciprocate or acknowledge me for all that I'm doing for them and all that other crazy stuff that I do. So, but the ideal of true love, and again, I talk a lot about this in the second edition, is this idea that true love is based on how much we can give. Now, as I've said a million times in this workshop, and I'm going to repeat later, this doesn't mean we become a martyr. This doesn't mean we excuse somebody else's inappropriate behavior, harmful behavior. We don't have to become a doormat. And loving another person doesn't mean we stop loving ourselves. So as I talked about in chapter 7, it's really important to learn how to have healthy boundaries if we really want to have intimacy and true love in our relationships. If I don't know how to set boundaries with somebody, chances are pretty good that I'm not going to be able to take care of myself in that relationship or that situation. And if I'm not taking care of myself, in my experience at least, things can go wrong very quickly. So true love is concerned with what it can give rather than what it can get. And we have to know how to take care of ourselves in a healthy way in the relationship in order to do that. Now, I talk about a lot about what happens when a relationship ends. And if I'm reacting, the way I react when a relationship ends depends on how valuable and worthy I feel. So if I'm with somebody and they break up with me and the relationship ends, if I'm feeling really bad, and there's a lot of ways to describe that, but I'll say if I'm feeling unworthy, not good enough, unlovable, I'm going to suggest, at least for me, this is true, that I don't feel that way because of what the other person did. I feel that way because that's how I see myself. See, I wouldn't feel unlovable, I wouldn't feel unworthy, I wouldn't feel not good enough if somebody left me in a relationship, if I thought I was lovable, if I thought I was good enough, if I thought I was worth being loved. So I'm going to suggest, for me at least, that when I have those negative feelings when a relationship ends, it's not what they think of me that's the problem, it's what I think of myself. Because if I feel good about myself, I may be sad that the relationship is over. I may have normal feelings of grief or loss. But if I'm feeling unworthy, not good enough, unlovable, and eventually if I find that I'm really resentful, if I'm really angry, chances are pretty good that I'm reacting to my own thoughts about myself, not what they did or didn't do. I'm not making excuses for somebody else's inappropriate or harmful behavior. But what they do doesn't determine how I feel. We talked a lot about this in the first 3 chapters. Now, I go on in this chapter to talk about the relationship between esteeming children and the sense of value that we feel as adults. So with regard to esteeming our kids, a sense of entitlement and self-centeredness only comes from people who lack self-esteem and are trying to compensate for it. Now, I'm not a child psychologist. I'm not even a parent. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. But I think, I hear there's a lot of discussion that we're over-esteeming our children, that we're making it too easy for them, that kind of thing. And I guess everybody's got to decide for themselves what's right and what's not right in terms of raising kids. But I personally don't think it's possible to over-esteem a child. Not in a healthy way. Healthy esteem. Instead of cutting them down for their mistakes, for their shortcomings, instead of blaming them for how we feel, instead of taking out our, scapegoating them if there's a problem in the house or whatever, we interact with them in a healthy way, a respectful way, an empowering way. That's healthy self-esteem, and I don't think you can do that too much for a child. And it's my position, it's my belief that the people who, as adults, have this sense of self-centeredness or entitlement, they never received healthy self-esteem as kids. again, that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm not an expert, but that's kind of my sense of it. That's certainly looking back at my own life, looking at the children in my life. That's kind of where I go with it. All right, so what is love? So this is a great question. And I'm going to say in a minute, I'm going to say love is not a feeling. Love is a decision. But we're not quite there yet. So number 12, love is that which is without condition, without limitation, and without need. Love is that which is free. Now, this comes from Friendship with God. That's a book in the Conversations with God book series written by Neil Donald Walsh. I've talked a lot about those books over the course of the workshop, and in my book, I quote from the Conversations with God books a few times. And I love this definition. Love is without condition, without limitation, without need, and love is that which is free. Now, again, as I said a minute ago, loving another doesn't mean we stop loving ourselves. So this means we also need to have healthy boundaries if we truly want to love, to have intimacy and love in our relationships. Because if I go into a situation and I say, well, love is without limitation, what does that mean? So boundaries are placing limitations in a relationship. And if I say, well, love is without any limitations, I'm potentially setting myself up for somebody else's, or even my own, inappropriate behavior, taking advantage of the situation, taking advantage of me. There's a lot of ways that can go wrong. So when I say without limitation, it's within the context of I'm not imposing my limitations on somebody else, because remember, we talked about boundaries and we said, my boundaries are for me, they're not for other people. So I'm not actually imposing a limitation on somebody else, but I am limiting what I'm willing to accept in that relationship. And if somebody else is being inappropriate, harmful, abusive, neglectful, it's up to me to take care of myself in that situation, which could mean leaving the relationship, leaving the immediate situation, that kind of thing. Now, this is new for the second edition, chapter 4. Some people equate love with sacrifice. The idea is the more the other person gives up for us, the more they love us. And in a not so ironic way, we gauge how much another person loves us by how much they stop loving themselves. For me, that's what sacrifice is about. I'm giving up something that I love, something that's important to me, something that I want for myself. I'm giving that up for somebody else. That's a sacrifice. And the way many of us, I'll speak for myself, the way I've gauged love in my relationships with other people is by how much I perceive they're sacrificing what's important to them for me, for my needs, for my wants, for my desires. But I'm essentially expecting them to stop loving themselves to prove how much they love me. Good luck with that. 15, the great love enders. This also comes from Friendship with God. Neediness, expectation, and jealousy. I don't have time to go into all of them, but I will say for me, 16, jealousy. Jealousy is a feeling of insecurity, resentment, and/or self-pity aroused by the idea that another person possesses someone or something which I feel rightfully belongs only to me. How selfish is that? How self-centered is that? And the problem is with jealousy, we project that onto the other person. And we feel resentful, we feel justified in getting even, we feel entitled to undermine them in that other relationship if they're in a relationship with somebody else. All kinds of bad stuff comes from that, from this thing we call jealousy. And it's really a reflection of how I see myself. I'm jealous because I think somebody has taken something away from me, something that belongs to me, something that I deserve, and now somebody has taken that away from me. And I'm blaming them for how I feel. And we've said over and over and over again that nobody makes us feel anything. I'm responsible for my thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. So when I feel jealousy, there's probably for me, jealousy, there's always a good bit of self-pity in there, and this feeling that I'm not good enough. And this is a reminder, this is proof that I'm not good enough, because the one I think should be with me is with somebody else. It's pure insanity. And for most of my life, that's the way I did my love relationships, intimate relationships. All right, love versus need. So I found that for me, and I see this in other people, we often confuse love and need. If I think I need something from you, I can't truly love you, because I'm in that relationship to get what I think you can give me, what I think I need from you. Also, for most of my life, I was plagued by the notion that I have to be needed in order to have a relationship with another person. So this idea of love versus need, it's like, if I need something from somebody, then I'm there to get. And if I don't get what I think I need, I'm going to be resentful. I'm going to find fault with them. I'm going to judge them. I'm going to make them wrong. I may even leave the relationship and blame them for it. So need is about getting. Remember, a moment ago, I said true love is concerned only with what it can give, not with what it can get. So if I think I need something from you, I can't truly love you, because now I have conditions, I have expectations. And when you don't live up to those conditions or expectations, then I feel justified in getting even, leaving the relationship, judging you, and all that stuff. And the flip side of it is, I never saw myself as lovable. So it never occurred to me that somebody would want to just love me for who I am. It was always the idea of what I could do for them, how I could fulfill a need for them. That's what made people want to be in relationship with me. The idea that I can be loved just for who I am never even occurred to me. All right, number 18, seeing inequality in any relationship is highly codependent and a sign of immaturity. Again, I'm not going to go into too much of this now. This is in chapter 4 in the book. The only thing I will say about this is, for most of my life, I saw my relationships as unequal. So somebody was more valuable, somebody was more worthy, somebody was more lovable than the other. And seeing any relationship that way is highly codependent and is a sign of immaturity. 19, if I think someone is more valuable than me, I'll live in fear of them leaving me, because I will quite literally be worth less if someone worth more than me leaves me. If my value as a person is contingent on who I'm in relationship with, in chapter 4, I talk about celebrity worship and how we put people on pedestals in our relationships. And so if I associate with somebody, whether it's an intimate relationship, a friendship, it could even just be a job. If I associate with that person and I think somehow, because they're valuable, they're special, they're important, they're a celebrity, whatever it is, if I think associating with them kind of rubs off, their specialness rubs off on me, and that makes me more special, then if that relationship ends for whatever reason, now suddenly I'm going to be worth less, because somebody worth more than me has left the relationship, whatever. That's the insanity that I lived most of my life with, in my personal relationships, sometimes in my work relationships, and often in my romantic relationships. Talk a lot more about that in chapter 4. Number 20, what other people think of me is none of my business. All right, I didn't invent this, but it's a good reminder. I suggest putting this on your refrigerator and a sticky note on your bathroom mirror. What other people think of me is none of my business. I have spent so much time worrying about what other people think about me. And it doesn't matter when I think well of myself. If I love myself, if I'm happy with me, if I see myself as a good person, as a valuable person, as a talented person, it does not matter what other people think about me. And in truth, it's none of my business. Now, I probably want to be open for feedback. If people have suggestions, that kind of thing. But when I live in fear of other people judging me, of other people thinking less than me because of who I am, it kills any chance of intimacy either with that person or with myself. And then related to that, another sticky note for the bathroom mirror: no one has the power to hurt me unless I give them that power. Talk a lot about giving our power away. I don't have time to go into it tonight. We talked a lot about that in the first review last week, giving our power away. But the truth is, nobody has the power to hurt me unless I give them that power. 22, fear often manifests as defensiveness. Now, I talk a lot about this in the book. I've talked about it in the past. Defensiveness is a coping mechanism. It's designed to help us deal with feelings of powerlessness. So it's kind of, I'm defensive. If I defend myself, then you can't hurt me. If I defend myself, I put up a wall. And the examples I gave in the book, where I've actually had this experience where a client has sent me an email or called me, and the first time I read that email or listened to that phone call, I felt like they were being critical of me. I felt like they were being mean to me, being unfair, judging me, whatever. And I became defensive, and I responded to them defensively. And on second read, or when I went back afterwards and reread that message, that email or whatever, I can see that I totally distorted the message, that it was totally my own subjective interpretation, and they weren't really attacking me at all. And so when before I did that and I attacked them, I was surprised that they were surprised that I was attacking them, because I thought they attacked me first. But when I went back and looked at the message or whatever, I could see, wow, I totally misread that. The fact that it happened more than once, and the fact that it happened with multiple people in multiple situations, began to clue me in that I had this defensiveness thing going on, and it wasn't serving me. Defensiveness begets defensiveness. So when I react defensively, chances are pretty good the other person is going to respond in kind, and that's going to undermine any chance that we have of resolving the issue in a healthy way. Number 25, fear is the absence of love. So I'm talking about the relationship between fear and love. A Course in Miracles says fear is the absence of love. And in the book, again, I don't have time to go into it tonight, but in the book, and I've shared about this on prior workshops, one of the things that I did when I first got my photography business going was I made cold calls. And it was very stressful, and I was very anxious, and I was very hard on myself. And what I found was it wasn't the other people who were the problem. Almost everybody, in 2 years of cold calling, I never got hung up on once. And I guess they felt sorry for me, because a lot of them would recommend other people that I could call if they weren't interested. They were all very nice. And yet I was anxious. I was fearful. My hands would shake. I would sweat. It was just an awful experience. And eventually I realized the problem was not the other people. The problem was me. I was being really hard on myself. I was berating myself, all of that, while I was making those calls. And that was the source of the problem. So the fear that I was feeling was caused by the absence of love. I was not loving myself. I was hating myself in those moments. When I was beating myself up, you should have said this. Why didn't you say that? Now they're going to know that you don't know what you're doing. You're a fraud. Nobody's going to want to hire you. Beating myself up, that was the absence of love. So what I did was I started to be nice to myself. I started to do my best to love myself when I made those calls. And the whole thing changed. I went from that feeling of fear to a much calmer, much better, more positive experience. Self-love, how much I love myself when I least like who I'm being. That's pretty self-explanatory. 28, love is a decision, not a feeling. It's a choice to treat ourselves or other people in a certain way. So again, yes, we feel affection for people, we feel joy. We can have this emotion called love, but for me, it's better to think of it as a choice, as a decision that I have to make. And it's a decision to treat myself or other people in a certain way. And my thoughts, feelings, words, and actions have to be consistent with that decision, with that choice. Unconditional love. It's just that. It's just that. There are no conditions under which we withhold our love. Now, again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier about loving without any limitations. Obviously, there can be some challenges with that. We talked about this. Number 30, loving another when they're acting inappropriately doesn't mean we're condoning their bad behavior. We can still do whatever we need to do to protect ourselves. We can still do whatever we need to do to protect ourselves. But it does mean that we don't belittle them, we don't attack them, we don't punish them for what they've done. We take care of ourselves without making somebody else wrong, without blaming somebody else for how we feel. Loving another means wanting for them what they want for themselves, while at the same time honoring ourselves and not making anyone wrong for their choices. Loving another, if I want for you what you want for you, I'm loving you. If I want for you what I want for you, I'm loving myself through you. But again, I have a whole discussion in here. It's not always clear cut. It's not always simple. And loving another doesn't mean we stop loving ourselves. So we may or may not be able to continue the relationship, to continue the situation that we're in, if it is harmful to us, if it's inappropriate for us. So loving another doesn't mean we stop loving ourselves, but we don't make them wrong for their choices. We don't make ourselves wrong for our choices either. FEAR, false evidence appearing real. Again, the example I give an example in the book. False evidence appearing real. The conclusion that I come to is fear is not real because it's a subjective interpretation of the situation based on who we think we are and how we see ourselves. And when I change how I see myself, when I change how who I think I am in that situation, I have a different experience and the fear disappears. So is the fear real? The best antidote to fear is getting into action, taking action. When I was doing those cold calls, I was paralyzed with fear. It was only by picking up the phone and making that call when I started to push through those fears. That's when things began to change. And finally, we must see ourselves differently to do things differently. All right, if you're new here, I'm going to take a 5-minute break. I'm going to play a song. This is Love My Life by Robbie Williams. I can't actually play this song on YouTube. So if you're watching the rerun, you got to go get the song yourself. But the lyrics will be on screen. Life-affirming lyrics. Sing along. We'll be back in 5 minutes. All right, we're back. I don't know how I'm going to finish this. Chapter 5, decision-making and the desire to feel better. So this chapter talks a lot about how we make choices and decisions and why we make the choices and decisions that we do. So like everything else, it starts off with our childhood. According to John Bradshaw, every child needs to know two things. Number one, that their parents are okay, and two, that the child matters. In some cases, the need to know that their parents care is so great that children who don't get enough positive attention may engage in inappropriate behavior to get negative attention. So it's this idea that even the youngest child has a sense of whether or not they matter to their parents, i.e. whether or not they're loved, and or whether or not their parents are okay, whether or not their parents can take care of them. And if one or both of those is not met, those needs is not met, it can create anxiety. It can create distrust. It can create problems. Now we're going to relate this to what I call the two core questions. Am I safe? Am I loved? We'll talk about those in a few minutes, but it's born out of our childhood experience in many cases. And so if a child does not feel that they're loved and they don't get positive reinforcement, positive attention, they may engage in negative behavior to get, or inappropriate behavior to get negative attention. Number three, a child, I'll admit this may be me projecting, but number three, a child who stands up for him or herself may be better off in the long run than one who cowers. We may therefore want to encourage our children to challenge us. Now, again, I don't have time to go into it now, but I talk a lot about this in the second edition, the relationship between, healthy parents and their children. And, I can see for myself that I can see how it's helpful to encourage our children to challenge us instead of, obedience and yes, we need to have rules, we need to have boundaries, children need to have all of that stuff, and giving children an opportunity to stand up for themselves, to express a contrary opinion, to speak their mind without fear of being shut down, without fear of being ridiculed, without fear of being punished or shamed, I think is pretty important. Number four, adults who have not made peace with their own feelings, such as feelings of guilt, shame, sadness, fear, anger, etc., may attempt to repress these emotions in a child. Now, again, I'm not a child psychologist. I'm not even a parent, so take what you like and leave the rest. But I can see it in my own life, and I can see it in the children and in relationships, family relationships. It's really, really important to allow kids to have their feelings, to express their feelings, and I think it can be very harmful or, at least thwarting in some way. For instance, tell a child you shouldn't feel that way. Shouldn't feel that way. Don't feel that way. What's wrong with you? Why do you feel that way? So, and my sense is that if I haven't dealt with those feelings in and of myself, if I'm not comfortable with my own feelings of shame or sadness or anger, then it's going to be very difficult for me to allow my child or children in my life to express those feelings, because it triggers me. It triggers that unhealed emotional state within me. All right, number five. Addictions and compulsive behaviors can be about coping with fear and or emotional trauma or stress. They can be an attempt to escape from or soothe the pain brought on by our difficult childhood experiences. Now, again, I'm speaking only for myself. This is my experience. I have had challenges around addictive compulsive behaviors. And when I look back, when I work backwards, I can see a lot of that was an attempt to soothe these negative, the negative emotional, let's just say, reactive states from my childhood experiences. I'm not blaming my parents. I'm not blaming my childhood. And it's important for me it was important for me to make that connection, to make that link. I do say many times in the book that parenting is the toughest job on the planet. I'm not making anybody wrong for what they do or don't do as a parent. certainly appreciate and love my parents, everything they did for me and still do for me. So, but it is helpful for me to put the pieces together and to make those connections and to see how those experiences informed my sense of self, my identity, how valuable, how worthy, how lovable I feel, and to kind of unpack that and undo that. Now, in terms of addictive compulsive behaviors, for me, again, you know, the underlying cause of all my afflictions is self-hatred. Self-hatred is the ultimate source of pain from which many of us try to escape through our addictions. Now, this is certainly true of me, and I've spent a lot of time in recovery rooms, 12-step programs. I see this in other people. Self-love, self-forgiveness, self-acceptance has been a big part of my recovery from things like substance addictions, behavioral addictions, codependency, and all of that. Learning to love myself, learning to accept myself, not beating myself up for my mistakes, not hating myself when I least like who I'm being, but rather loving myself when I least like who I'm being, reparenting myself, doing for me all the things I wish had been done for me as a child. Not that my childhood was bad. You know, my parents definitely did the best they could do. They did a lot of great and wonderful things. They made sacrifices for me and my siblings. You know, wonderful, wonderful parents. And there were still negative consequences, negative experiences for me that have shaped who I am as an adult. And so to begin to undo all of that, to heal all of that. And the recognition, for me at least, that a big part of my addictive compulsive behavior was born out of that sense of unworthiness, self-hatred, self-loathing. Now, in terms of the actual addictions themselves, and again, I'm speaking only for myself. I know other people have different experiences and different opinions about this, but I choose to look at my addictions as I do everything I do because I choose to. Now, I may be making terrible choices, but it's still helpful for me to look at that as choices that I'm making, things that I'm choosing. I'm exercising my power. Remember, true power is the capacity or ability to choose and or change our thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. Now, as we'll talk about in a minute, I'll talk about it right now. For me, a big part of the problem of the addiction was that I blamed everybody else for why I was doing what I was doing. So, you know, if it was acting out in some way in a relationship, if it was substance abuse, you know, whatever it was always somebody else's fault. If they had treated me better, I wouldn't have to do that. If they were nicer to me, I wouldn't feel bad about myself. And so I used the unloving, or let's just say unenlightened behavior of others as an excuse for my own destructive behaviors. Now, talked a lot about this in chapter 2. I'm going to say it again. Taking responsibility for all of that is not the same as blaming myself for that. Taking responsibility for all my choices and decisions is not the same as blaming myself for those choices and decisions, especially the terrible choices or self-destructive choices that I made. Taking responsibility is different. So it's actually empowering for me to take responsibility for my choices, because ultimately that's how I take my power back. As long as it's somebody else's fault that I'm doing what I'm doing, whether it's in an addiction or not, I'm giving my power away. I'm blaming somebody else for that choice or decision. And the truth is, we said this last week, I'll say it again, nobody has the power to make me think, feel, say, or do anything. At some level, I'm choosing that. All right, so now the specifics. So there's a reason we do what we do. And I have a whole elaborate discussion of this in the book. I'm not going to get into it now. But ultimately, the reason we do what we do is one of two things. We want to look good or we want to feel good. Now, I can look at every choice or decision that I've made in my life, and if I tell the truth about it, and if I look hard enough, I see that the motivation behind every one of those was either I wanted to look good or feel good. Now, as I say in the book, it's not really that simple. There's more to it. for me at least, and I see this in other people, when I look good, I feel good. Or when I think I look good, I feel good. And we're not just talking about appearances. It might be in terms of my career. It could be in terms of, the house or the home I live in or the car I drive. I'm going to talk about the car in a minute. But when I think I look good, I feel good. So really, ultimately, the reason I do what I do is because I want to feel good. Now that's probably obvious. Psychologists, I think maybe it was Freud, started talking about the pleasure principle. We instinctively seek pleasure and avoid pain. But then I realized there's still more to it. It's not just that we want to feel good. The reason we do everything we do is because we want to feel better. Everything I think I want, everything I do, everything I choose is because I think I will feel better by being, doing, or having that thing. So at the root of every choice or decision I make, it's this desire to feel better. Now, what happens is the existence of a problem creates a tension in our minds. And when the tension is solved, when the problem is solved, the tension is released and we feel better. So the example I give in the book is, let's say somebody's going to purchase a new car. Now, the reason, the problem that decision solves is different for different people. So for someone, it could be, their old car, their current car is unreliable. For somebody else, it might be that they have a growing family and they need more room for the kids. For somebody else, the problem that the new car solves might be a better reflection of their social status, their career, their position in life. But in every case, there's a tension. There's a problem that creates a tension, and we try to solve that problem by making that choice or decision. And we think we'll feel better. So if I have a problem with my car and I think buying a new car is going to solve that problem, that's where the better feeling comes from, feeling better. Now, the problem is there's often competing desires to feel better that influence our choices and can conflict with one another. So let's say, for instance, in the car example, if I want to feel better on the car reliability front, but that means buying a new car, then all of a sudden I may not feel better on the financial front. There's a conflict between wanting a new car and my finances. So I feel better in one realm, but worse in the other. So I've got to navigate that. And if we're in a relationship with somebody, they may have a conflicting desire to feel better. Again, I'm not going to give examples, but just think about anybody, if you're married or in a long-term relationship, how what your spouse thinks will make you feel better and what you think will make you feel better are two different things. Disappointment is when we're expecting something to make us feel better and it doesn't. That's what disappointment is. And the other thing I'll say now is sometimes we're trying to feel better in a really bad situation. So what that means is this desire to feel better is relative. So again, the example I give in the book is a parent that screams at their child in the shopping mall or in the grocery store. It's hard to say that the parent feels good in that situation, but they're still doing what they do to feel better. The problem may be that they feel powerless. They may be afraid that their child is going to be injured or hurt themselves or hurt somebody else. Young kids on the escalator at the mall, look at how the parents position themselves on the escalator with the kids. Now, when the parent lashes out in that situation, they're not bad parents, they're not wrong or anything like that, but it's to recognize that the problem in that situation is how I see myself. If I think I can't control my child, then I'm going to react one way when that child acts in a way that might cause injury to themselves or another. If I change how I see myself, and I talk about this later in this chapter, for instance, if I know that when I take my kid to the shopping mall, that he or she often will run off on their own and I will feel stressed about that or powerless, I can do some advanced intention, some pre-planning to decide in advance how I'm going to handle that situation. So I'm not just reacting in the moment. I have a plan. I have a strategy. I've thought it through. So when it happens, I'm not surprised, and I don't have to react from that place of seeing myself as powerless, unable to control my child. So sometimes we're trying to feel better in a bad situation. Now, I alluded to this earlier. So these are the two core questions that I believe influence many of our choices and decisions, certainly the desire to feel better. And the questions are, am I safe and am I loved? Now, remember, John Bradshaw says every child needs to know two things. Number one, that the child matters. Number one, that their parents are okay. And two, that the child matters. Now, if my parents are not okay, they have an emotional problem, a psychological, physical disability or something like that, that may generate fear. That may generate anxiety. Am I safe? Am I safe in the world? Am I going to be taken care of? Can I take care of myself? If I can't take care of myself, is there somebody who can take care of me? Am I safe? Second part of that is, do I matter? If I feel like I didn't matter in my family to my parents, as an adult, I may feel unlovable. It's not to say that that was the correct conclusion, but that was the best that I could do as a 6-year-old, coming to this conclusion that I'm not lovable. So am I safe? Am I loved? If I feel unlovable, I'm going to question that in every relationship. I'm going to question that in every situation. I'm not going to trust that other people really mean it when they say they love me or they like being with me. And that's going to create all kinds of problems, challenges for me and for the other person and in the relationship. So often we're trying to feel better in every choice and decision we make. We're trying to feel better on one or both of these questions. We're trying to feel more safe or more loved. So the example that I give in the book is when I moved to Los Angeles, I thought I was working in the entertainment industry. I was an entertainment attorney, and I thought I needed I was living in Beverly Hills, and I thought I had to have a car to fit that role. I thought I had to have a fancy sports car. In this case, European sports car. In this case, a black BMW convertible. And there's nothing wrong with black BMW convertibles. There's nothing wrong with having a nice car. But we're talking about making better choices and decisions by being aware of what's motivating us to make that choice or decision. And looking back now, I can see I got that car because I thought I needed that car to fit in, i.e., I thought I would be more acceptable, i.e., more lovable, if I drove that kind of a car. I thought I would impress people. People would think better of me. These were all my dysfunctional attempts to feel good about myself. So I leased the car that I couldn't afford, that turned out to be a financial nightmare. And because I felt like a fraud, I couldn't really enjoy it anyway. Driving around in a beautiful convertible, feeling like a fraud. So if I had changed my idea about myself, see, how we see ourselves influences how safe and how loved we feel. If I had changed my idea about myself to someone who was acceptable no matter what car I drove, I could have spared myself a lot of unnecessary financial and emotional distress. Number 17, the body is decision maker. What used to seem to help us feel better eventually causes us to feel worse. This is the addictive compulsive cycle, where we act out in the addiction. We think we feel better. We make that choice because we think it'll make us feel better. And eventually it causes us to feel worse, and it becomes a downward spiral. Again, I say a lot more about that in the book. I don't have time to go into that now, but number 18, there's no such thing as a bad choice or wrong decision. Now, we've talked about this a bunch of times during the course of the year in the workshop. And, again, we're talking about making better choices and decisions. And sometimes the concern that we're going to make the wrong choice can become so acute that we don't make any choice at all. Or we're second guessing ourselves, or we're beating ourselves up for our choices, that kind of thing. So if we want to make better choices and decisions, it's very helpful for me, at least, to say there's really no such thing as a bad choice or wrong decision if I'm willing to do two things. Number one, willing to learn from my mistakes, but most importantly, number two, being willing to forgive myself for them. And the example that I give in the book and that I talked about in prior workshops was the example of Thomas Edison. Apparently, it took him 10,000 attempts to invent the light bulb. And when he was asked about it, he said, "I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that didn't work." That's the kind of attitude we want to have, all right? A failure is really just a learning opportunity. But if I don't see myself that way, if I see myself as unworthy, unlovable, I'm going to beat myself up for every failure, for every mistake. Every time I don't get the result that I think I'm supposed to get, or a result that says I'm a certain kind of person, I'm going to beat myself up. I'm going to feel bad about myself. That's not a way to make healthy choices and decisions. So there's no such thing as a bad choice or wrong decision if, number one, we learn from our mistakes, number two, forgive ourselves for them. So instead of failure, how about teachable moment, learning opportunity, or one step closer to my goal? You know, when you take a sales course on selling, they always say, you know, every no means you're one person closer to getting a yes. So we can shift how we see the situation by shifting how we see ourselves. And also, you know, this is something else that I've learned. I can make almost any wrong decision or action on my part right by taking responsibility for it. Because the problem is often that I would do something harmful to myself or another person, but then I wouldn't take responsibility for it. I would just beat myself up. I would feel bad or guilty, but I would never make it right. So even if I do something quote unquote wrong, I can make it right by taking responsibility for that, making an amends to myself or another person for my harmful or inappropriate behavior. Beginning with the end in mind, we've talked about this a bunch of times. That's starting with setting an advanced intention. I alluded to this earlier. If we have a challenging situation coming up, we're meeting with a client or a person that we know pushes our buttons or challenges us, spend a little bit of time in advance writing out how you want that interaction to go. Who do you want to be in that situation? How do you want to see yourself? And then come back to that in the days and weeks, or weeks, days, and hours leading up to that event. Because we'll go in with a positive intention, chances are pretty good we'll have a positive result, or at least a better result than we would have had if we just went in cold. Everything we do for ourselves. Our choices are an expression of who we think we are and who we want to be in life. So every choice or decision I make is a reflection of how I see myself, who I think I am. This is why this question, who do you think you are? How do you see yourself? That's why it's so important. Everything we do or don't do, everything we have or don't have is a reflection of that. It's a reflection of how we see ourselves. Number 24, life responds to our desires, and action is the strongest expression of desire. So in this part of the chapter, I talk about getting into action. So it was one thing when I was starting my photography business, it was one thing for me to sit around telling everybody that I wanted to be a professional photographer and all the great things I was going to do. It was another thing to actually do it. It was another thing to pick up the phone and make those cold calls. It was another thing to get into action and submit my photos to shows and exhibitions, contests, for publication. It took me a year sending my photos to a particular newspaper for almost a year, several times a month, before they finally actually published one of my photos. So it was the action, it was the desire to have my photo in the newspaper, followed up by action, taking action that led to me having that experience. And since then, I've had photos published in newspapers and magazines. I mean, literally millions of people around the world have seen my photos, but I had to take the action. And the desire that I have has to be backed up by action. Now, how much we desire something is often tempered by how possible we believe it is to achieve it. Fear of failure or disappointment can derail us before we even begin. So this is who do you think you are? How do you see yourself? When I made the decision that I was going to get my photos in the newspaper, I had to get over my fear of rejection. See, what I was doing was I cold called this newspaper. I got the photo editor on the phone and I said, I'm a local New York City photographer. I take great photos. I want to send them to you so you guys will put them in the newspaper. She said, great. She gave me her email address. For the next, it was almost 10 months, a few times, probably 5 or 6 times, at least a month, I sent her pictures and I never heard a word from her. Nothing. And I realized I had a choice. I had a decision. Am I going to keep sending them, or am I going to take this as a failure? Am I going to take this as a rejection? Am I going to give up on my dream, on my desire to see my photos in the newspaper? So it's that fear of failure or disappointment that can derail us. And I think the way this manifests, the 2 biggest blocks to believing that something is possible is getting caught up in how it's going to happen. And number 2, feeling unworthy of having that thing. So what I suggest is, whatever you want in life, don't think about how it's going to happen. Eventually, you're going to take action. You're going to come up with a plan. But I noticed that sometimes I'll take action in one direction and results will come from an entirely different place. So don't get caught up in how something is going to happen, because if we knew how to make something happen, we would already have it. So the how of it can become a reason to not try. It can become a reason to give up on our dream. So focus on what you want and why you want it. So what I wanted was to get my photos in the newspaper. Why I wanted it was to get exposure for my work, to get exposure for myself, credibility, credentials as a professional photographer, to make money, and to have the satisfaction of knowing that millions of people see my work that I work so hard to produce. So focus on why I want it, what I want, and why I want it, rather than how it's going to happen. And then the other part was just recognizing that my feelings of unworthiness, feeling not good enough, feeling like I don't deserve it, can get in the way of me taking those actions. All right. In this chapter, I talk about valuing things, why we value what we value. And I suggest that if you want to know what you value in life, take a look at where you spend your time and where you spend your money. Both time and money are indicators of value. Now, why is that important? Well, again, this chapter is dedicated to making better choices and decisions. So if I don't know what I value, then I won't know how to make better choices and decisions to obtain that, to realize that. Now, the other thing that I found for myself was I realized that I was valuing things that were not serving me. Again, the example I give in the book in this chapter is when I first started my photography business, I was spending a lot of time watching TV and playing computer games when I should have been promoting my business. So I was valuing those things at the expense of doing what I really needed to do to get my business going. So I recognized when I started to take an inventory and to keep track of how I was spending my time every day, I literally wrote down every hour what I did during that hour. I could see I was valuing things that were not serving me. And in fact, it was my way of avoiding what I needed to do. I thought I was just having fun, but what I was really doing was avoiding what needed to be done out of fear. It's not how we handle success that matters. Anybody can handle success. It's how we handle the failures, rejections, and disappointments. So when I speak to photography groups, when I talk about, when I do have a speaking engagement in front of photography groups, photography people, I tell them that in the last few years, I've won more than 70 awards for my photography. And when I tell them that, I can see their faces light up. And then I say, the next sentence I say, but for every one of those awards, there have been at least 5 failures, rejections, and disappointments. And the minute I say that, I can see their smile turns to a frown, because nobody wants to hear about failures, rejections, and disappointments. Now, it might be only me, but I think that's kind of the way life works. We're going to have failures, rejections, disappointments, things not working out. And if we don't know how to handle that, then we're going to be derailed from pursuing our dreams, our desires. what we really want to create for ourselves in our lives. So my suggestion, I talk about this in the book and I'll mention it here, is come up with a strategy. Have some kind of a plan, kind of a default strategy where you go to in the face of a disappointment, in the face of a failure or rejection. So the example that I give in the book is that my strategy was when I started submitting my photos for shows, for exhibitions, for publication, every time I got rejected from a show or contest or for publication, I would submit 2 more photos to different shows and exhibitions. It didn't matter why I thought I was rejected. It didn't matter. I didn't take it personally. I didn't even question it. I just said, oh, I got a rejection. I have to find 2 more shows or exhibitions to submit my work to. That became the strategy. That became the default plan of what I was going to do in the face of that rejection or disappointment. Because at first, I would take it personally. I would feel hurt. Oh, I'm not good enough. Nobody likes my photos. I would feel sorry for myself. And nothing would happen. And I would stop sending my photos in, So what I'm saying is you got to have a plan. You got to have a strategy, something that you fall back on when things don't go the way you expect. Now, we want to be open to suggestions. We may have to change the plan. In fact, we often will have to change the plan. But if we don't have a plan, we're stuck because it's very easy for that stuff to catch up with you. And then I say here, I'm going to finish it with, of course, the best strategy is to be your own best friend in life. So sometimes when I'm interviewed on a podcast or something like that, I talk about my business plan. So this is my 4-point business plan. Number 1, never give up. And that's because there's no guarantee of success in life, but there is one guarantee of failure. And that's if we give up. Number 2, don't take anything personally. So as I said a few minutes ago, if I took those rejections personally, I would have quit. I would have felt sorry for myself. I would have stopped. So you can't take the rejections personally. But what I also found in an odd way, I can't take the success personally either. Because if I take the success personally, eventually I'm going to take the failure personally. But that's another discussion. Don't take anything personally. Number 3, do at least one thing every day to move your business and your life forward. Could only be a simple thing, but do something proactive. Get into some kind of action. Hopefully a lot more than one thing, but let one thing be enough. And at the end of a year, you will have done 365 things that move you closer to where you want to be. Right now, I'm reliving my photography experience with the book. So I'm starting to submit this book for awards, for contests, for writing awards, things like that. And I'm going through the whole thing all over again, and all the doubt and the fear and I got to put all that out of my head and I have to take action. I spent all day yesterday trying to format the ebook to submit to this one particular award contest. And so I got to take the actions. I got to do something every day to move forward, to get to where I want to be. Number 4, forgive yourself when you don't do 1, 2, or 3. That's the most important point in the plan. Self-love, self-acceptance, becoming your own best friend instead of your own worst enemy is the only way that I can see to achieve what I want in life. All right, guys, so that's it for the review. Anybody want to say anything? It's your chance to chime in.
I say, wow, and thank you. Emphasis on how to get over, how to heal all facets of self-loathing. I heard that loud and clear. I don't walk around thinking, oh, I hate myself, but every once in a while, I can so feel it. And where that comes from and how to get rid of it, I look forward to hearing thanks pass.
All right, thanks, Dee Dee. Ultimately, it's a choice, and it's an arbitrary choice. In that moment but I have to be aware of it. See, that thought that I'm not good enough, it was not a conscious kind of thing. It wasn't I was walking around I mean, I guess some days I actually was walking around, you know, I'm not good enough, people don't like me. But for the most part, it's like a subconscious program that plays that we're not even aware of. So the first thing is to become aware of it, question it, but ultimately, from what I can tell, it's just an arbitrary choice that I'm going to love myself instead of beat myself up in this moment. Like the thing I did today with, you know, having that emotional imbalance, you know, my inclination was to start beating myself up for that. And I said, no, that's not who I want to be. I don't want to beat myself up for stuff like that anymore. So I had to make a choice, and it's quite arbitrary. But the quality of my life hangs in the balance. Thank you, Dee Dee. Who else?
No, I was
Cynthia.
going to say well,
Barb.
no. Yeah, I was going to say it's really good to review, to know where you were and where we are today. You know, I know things are going to come up again. You know, life happens, but I really feel like like you said, I have really progressed, and you know, you got to keep on doing the things that cause the problems, but we're going to be different in this situation, and life is going to be better. So the workshop did that, Peter. So thank you.
You're welcome. And you did it.
Okay, I understand that, but I did it with your help. Okay, thank you.
I'm very helpful. And, you know, whatever you guys experience, it's because you did it. Cynthia.
Yes, I've been reading ahead into the 7th chapter in forgiveness, and all of the things you were talking about today are so meaningful, because underneath all and on top of all is that self-forgiveness, so that I can see that I'm a person like everybody else, and that I'm doing the best I can, you're doing the best you can, and there are computer glitches, and we're just doing the best we can on any given day. And I can take care of myself by setting boundaries for myself primarily, and what I will accept and what I won't accept. And I love the work that you've done, and the book that is your newest book with all this new material, and I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. I'm grateful for you guys too. Thank you. Anybody else? All right, I'm going to play the song one more time. Come back for our final goodbyes. All right, guys, so that's it for tonight. I think next week is going to be the last week. If I can get through. The problem is chapter 6 isn't too long, but chapter 7 is the longest, by far the longest chapter in the book. So I'm going to have to streamline my presentation to fit it all in, because we went over a half hour already tonight. So anybody want to say anything?
I'm Holly, and I just want to say thank you for your workshop. And so I'm new here, of course. And I want to thank Cindy for bringing me you to my attention. So I really enjoyed the workshop, very much so.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Holly. Glad you're here. Glad you're able to join us. If you're interested, if you don't know, there's a whole library, a whole catalog online this is probably week 56 or 58 or something like that. So we started last July 2020. But my point is, there's a whole bunch of videos online, if you haven't seen them, from all the past workshops. So you're welcome to check those out either on my website, bebiggertoday.com/videos, or the YouTube channel. Thank you for being here.
Thank
Anybody
you.
else? You're welcome. Anyone else say anything?
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night, guys.
Nice job, Peter. Thanks, everybody.
Good
Thanks,
night.
Dee Dee. If you guys bought a book on Amazon, don't forget the reviews. As many stars as you could fit in there if you want. And tell your friends. And remember, be bigger than you think you are today and every day. Have a great week, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. You too.